privacy notice will open up here on the top of your screen. Have a read or click dismiss. And Michael, I'd like to invite you in to introduce our guests and start tonight's presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, Damien. Thanks a million for that. So I suppose, first of all, thanks a million to everybody for coming. I'll just draw on that presentation here now. So basically the area that we're going to look at tonight is coaching sheets, and it's really what the three lads, what works well for them and their coaching, and basically hints and tips that they can give you that you may be able to bring to your own training sessions when you go back, and your games and different things like that. You take on there, Damien. So as Damien was saying, this is a structure that we would use. I'm a secondary school teacher, and what we use is it's called a teach meet. So basically what happens in it is each presenter gets 10 minutes. And so the lads tonight are going to present on what works well for them in their coaching practice.
Sorry, Michael.
No, you're grand. So they'll get 10 minutes to present. So just a couple of things on the presentations. So we have a couple of videos within the presentations. For the first one, especially for Kevin, there's going to be a black screen with some writing on it for a while, where you'll hear Kevin talking over it. So just don't be worried if you think that your video isn't working. It is. That's part of the video. And also we've tested the videos a few times. So if the videos are jumping a little bit, so they sometimes jump a little bit, that might be a bandwidth or a Wi-Fi problem. After the lads present for 10 minutes, there's going to be 5 minutes of question, and that's really where you're going to come in. So as Damien was explaining with the conversation box down in the corner, that's where your questions about what the lads are going to have to present or have presented are going to come into play. So the questions are going to be based upon what you ask within this the chat box, and it really is to disseminate and break down what the lads are after presenting and to get more detail on it. After the three lads have presented, we're going to go into a roundtable discussion, and the roundtable discussion is based upon the questions that some people have submitted pre-webinar that Damien sent out an email to anybody who signed up. So the three people that we have tonight is, just next slide there, Damien. So first of all, we're really delighted to be joined by the three lads. So we have Kevin Stritch. So Kevin is currently the Nafina GAA coach up in Dublin. He's the former Longford and Galway and Castleknock senior football coach. And Kevin tonight is going to be presenting on the attacking principles of play from video to the training pitch. Next up, we'll have Stephen Lonergan. Stephen is a PE teacher from Offaly. He has a master's in strength and conditioning. He's a former Offaly footballer himself, and he's the current Offaly under 17 or minor coach. And then finally, we'll have John Murphy. So John from Carlow. He has a master's in exercise and nutrition science. He's currently doing a PhD in that area. He presented at the Games Development Conference in 2018, and he's a coach development tutor. Stephen is going to present on the effective halftime strategies for all ages, while John is going to look at creative approaches to games-based session planning. So first up, we have Kevin's presentation, and that's going to be looking at the attacking principles of play from video to the training pitch. So
I'm sorry, Michael, just before I go there, yeah. If anybody's having a problem with their chat box, you can just try by logging out and logging back in if you don't view your chat box. And if that doesn't work, it's as much as we can offer at the minute. But most chat boxes should be working and you shouldn't have a problem. Thank you.
First clip I want you to look at is the All-Ireland final from 2017 between Mayo and Dublin at the start of the second half, and it ends in the Dublin score. The things I want you to look out for in the clip are Keane O'Sullivan is the fourth man to get the ball in this move in the middle of the pitch. He's going forward, keeps looking up all the time for his options ahead. He saw 4 number 1v1s inside the 45 and space in front of Mannion, and put a brilliant ball with one bounce into space. Mannion plays the way he faces, and with quick hands give the ball to Rock, who has created separation between him and his man while his marker was ball watching. Possibly Dublin's most accurate scorer, winning the ball facing
just under 90 seconds. Philly McMahon back once again to O'Callaghan, just holding up the point of the attack, waiting for Cian O'Sullivan to come forward. Down into space towards Mannion. Good quick layoff, brilliantly done. Dean Rock getting past Barrett, kicking and making sure. Lovely start to the second half for Dean Rock. A 4th point for him. And once again, these teams are level in the All-Ireland final.
Yeah, but Dublin looked to be a little bit more fluid in the second half. In the first couple of minutes, getting the ball in. Paul Mannion out in front and a good score by Dean.
Tom Parsons.
Second clip I want you to look at is from Kerry Tyrone in the All-Ireland semi-final last year, 15 minutes into the game. Tyrone get a kick out from Morgan. Sludden is going through the middle and receives a reverse pass from the Tyrone number 15. Sludden then looks up and delivers a ball from just inside the 65-metre line to McShane, who is playing deep. The Kerry defender does very good to hold McShane up, and he has to take 2 plays waiting for support. He then gets support from Sludden, who has continued his run and a score and over the bar. So in 2 different games, you can see the benefit of putting the ball into space and support runners coming off. The target man game is a game I play in training to promote this. The setup of the game, you have a pitch area of 100 metres long by 60 metres wide with 2 end zones with a target man in each one who is unmarked. There is a line of cones across each 55-metre line where the ball has to be delivered across. In the middle, you can have an optional neutral player to play with the team in possession to create an overloaded situation which forces teams to look up as they have an extra man. There are 2 number 6-metre wide gates behind each end zone, and you score by running the ball through one of them. The target man can be on a 3-second rule and has to play the way he faces, so has to offload the ball to a support runner. The target man can be Mannion or McShane, and support runners can be Rock or Sludden. This game goes from end to end. You can also develop the game in the following ways. You can have time limits for teams to get over the halfway line and develop to a full game where the target man is marked, but the team have to deliver the ball over a 50-metre line on the pitch. The next clip I want you to look at is from the National League last year between Dublin and Galway. And it's just before half time and the teams are level. Galway have 12 men behind the ball and the keeper, so they have 13 in total. Dublin hold the ball for over 1 minute before they get a score. The Dublin start off by getting a free on their own 21-metre line to bring the ball up the middle of the pitch, over to the Cusick, switch to the Hogan near the sideline, back to the Cusick near the sideline, and back to the Hogan and a point from Costello. Dublin have men high, men wide, men outside the 45 to swing the ball around, and constant movement looking for space, including keeping the D free to attack into. When Dublin go into corners, there was outlets outside to bring the ball back out parallel to the sideline before they came across. Dublin are always exploiting space and inject pace into their play when they see it. Men are also constantly interchanging positions, which can be seen where Costello was outside the opposition 45-metre line initially, but ended up kicking a score to finish the move by receiving the ball in the full forward line. Dublin's attacking shape is also their defensive shape in case they lose the ball by setting up an arc shape around the opposition defence.
They booted it inside towards Flynn, and this time it was the Galway number 9 who was doing the fouling, and Dublin who get the free out. We're going to have at least 2 minutes of additional time at the end of this first half. Dublin just doing enough to shade it so far. Nice ball to kick out Dean Rock. Arcing around into the centre. Eric Lowndes making a run by him. Instead, it's Niall Scully who is the intended target. Dublin will slow it right down as they try to pick apart this very well organised Galway defence. One thing you notice about from this elevated position we have in the Hogan stand is Dublin are probably the best team, even against the Blanket defence, in terms of they bring it from sideline to sideline. They use the full width of the pitch, move the ball through the hands,
tried it out the Cusick stand side. Now they might move it all the way back to the Hogan stand side, really stretching the defence at every opportunity, probing for spaces. Ball pops up right in front of Cormac Costello, who got the run on Thomas Flynn, who had dropped back to try and sweep. But Costello now has hit a real purple patch. That's 3 points.
Next clip I want you to watch is from the All-Ireland semi-final last year from Dublin and Mayo. It was just before half-time. This is a very similar situation to the last clip where Dublin are doing the exact same things. In this clip, Mayo have 15 men behind the ball and Dublin play a patience game. Mayo turned them over in contact, but Dublin held the ball very well to that point, switching the play, outlets, width, depth, as we went through in the last clip, which shows all the principles of beating the pack defence. Also notice in the clip the amount of hand passes Dublin make. The only time Dublin kick the ball is to come out and around the blanket defence, so as to limit the chances of losing the ball. Decoy runs are also very prominent, highlighted by Mick Fitzsimons after he passes the ball to Fenton on the Cusick. He injects pace to draw defenders out of the way to create space for Fenton to move into on other players.
And the match in an All-Ireland final against Mayo, Brian Howard. Kieran Kilkenny. James McCarthy hugging the sideline, and now he's come in field. McCarthy. Scully was the decoy. Conor Callahan trying to get in around the back of Lee Keegan. O'Callaghan had the ball. Keegan stood him up. Dial Scully didn't want to shoot. John Small back to Michael Darrell McCauley. Dublin with 4 points on the board. Mayo lead by 2 in the 24th minute. Mick Fitzsimons. One of Dublin players have been involved in this attack. Brian Fenton out in the corner. Kieran Kilkenny. As they try and work the player free to the edge or inside that exclusion zone.
2 different games, you can see how a team have to adjust their attacking principles when the opposition defence is set compared to the first 2 clips. The following game is a game I play in training to promote this. The first page shows the game setup. There are 3 gates 6 metres wide between the 14 and 21 metre lines. There are 2 number wide channels for width. The coach stands outside the far 65 metre line to start the game. You have a sweeper protecting the gates, and the red 11 is the outlet at the far 45 metre line if the red team turn the ball over. You can play this game from 9v9 up to 11v11. Now on the next page we will show where the players are. The yellow team score 1 point by running the ball through one of the 3 gates the sweeper is not protecting. After a score, the coach gives another ball to the yellow team. If there is a turnover, the red team have to get the ball to their link man with a runner coming off him across the far 45 metre line. So a few options to develop this game. You can add a blue line of markers at a 26 metre radius for kicking points outside of, or if you can get a kick pass into a man in the semicircle with a runner coming off him, you get 2 points. So really it's a development of the target man game. Another way to develop this game is to take away the middle gate and now score goals and points, which you can also score in the 2 outer wide gates if there's not a sweeper behind one of them. Another way then is to just develop this into a full game, but for the red defending team, you can have 2 extra coaches to stand in to lock up space, or you can give that team 2 extra defenders to mimic the team of the session, which is beating the back defence.
So, thanks a million, Kevin, for that. That was brilliant. So, if anybody's any questions, just make sure to pop them into the chat box on the right hand side. And just another thing, any of the videos, any of the games that Kevin's after presenting there, Damien will show you at the end where you can access them. The videos will have the voiceover as well. I suppose I get the first question kicked off, and I suppose the first question, Kevin, that I'd ask is, I suppose, how do you video your clips that you show to your players?
Well, I suppose I have, at county level and everything, you have various software packages, I suppose we had. So I used to use Huddle, just you can cut clips and not just upload your game or whatever, and you put it on it. So there's Dartfish or Sideline Eye and various other ones people can use. But I suppose if you're at club level and you don't have, I suppose your club, you're an underage team and you don't have access to that, you could just have games on the RTE or whatever, you're watching the Sunday game and you see a good clip that you want to see, and a cheapest possible way to do it is just to get your own phone and actually record the TV screen. It's as simple and as cheap as any, and very effective, just to send out in your WhatsApp group or whatever you want to do before training. There's also a free app that I use, is Record It. So all inter-county games or any good games that you'd see on TV are usually up on YouTube afterwards. And the Record It app, you can just record sections of games off it. It just records your screen. So it's a very handy app for anyone to use. And it actually just cuts the clip perfect that you could send out again. You could show before training, just hook it up to a TV or whatever, or send it out in a WhatsApp group. So I think there are two very cheap versions to do it, or else if you have obviously the analysis software, you can upload your games.
No, that's brilliant, Kevin. And you mentioned about putting clips into WhatsApp groups. Would you only put them into WhatsApp groups, or would you also use, would you show them in the changing room before training? Would you show them to individual players? How would you go about showing them to the players?
Well, it depends obviously on the situation. Sometimes you might be, I know with a lot of club teams, you might just get the pitch just beforehand. You mightn't have a facility to actually go in and meet and show clips before training. So if you can just, I suppose the best way is to put it up on a screen and show it before training, and actually just talk them through it and maybe a tactics board of what you want to achieve in the session. But I suppose if you're limited with time and stuff like that, and players arriving late, you could just put up a few clips on the WhatsApp group earlier in the day or whatever, and just get them to review them clips before the session.
Brilliant. The next question that I have is, I suppose, how many aspects we're talking about attacking principles of play there, and you were looking at attacking fast and hitting the man inside, or else attacking with a set or a set up defense. How many would you work on within an individual training session? Would you do the two within the one training session, or would you focus on just one?
Well, I think if you have a counter-attacking session like the target man game, I think there's enough in that for one night, you know what I mean, to work on that specifically and try and correct that, because there's a fair bit in that, like support runners, and you want to move the ball quick and getting the right man on the ball to deliver the ball in and stuff like that. So I think if you try to cover too many things in the session, you're not going to achieve much. Do you know what I mean? Like beating a pack defense, there's a lot in that alone. And if you're going to start mixing and matching in a session, you're not going to get the full benefit of it. So the way I do it anyway would be to focus one night on the target man game, and that's the focus of your session. That might be the focus of your week. I'd say you'd probably get a bit more out of it that you could do. Tuesday night, you could do it a bit more intense. Thursday, you could maybe, before the game at the weekend, you could still have a focus on that aspect of your play, and you're trying to bring that out in the game at the weekend. It would be the best way. And now you have 1 week where you're focused on one specific thing you want to improve with your team. And if you can see it coming out in the game, then you can see that your coaching is working. Yeah,
exactly. Just a question here in the chat box from CDA Scotland. So a lot of club training sessions, you may not have 25 people. Would you suggest coaching the principles of play within small-sided games, or will you be able to mirror the principles of play within small-sided games with probably lesser numbers?
Yeah, well, even if you had 16, you can play the target man game. It does, do you know what I mean? You could still narrow the pitch in just a bit tighter, and still you could shorten it slightly. Do you know what I mean? But the principle of getting the ball to a target man and a runner coming off is still coming out within the session. I don't think you don't need 25 players. You could have like 16, 14 players. You could still play the target man game, and the principle of moving the ball fast. And I think a lot of the target man game has a lot of skills as well. Like that should be the main focus of your session. Like even kicking in threes, like one kicks to two and three coming off, and like there's still a lot you can do with smaller groups. I've often had smaller groups with club teams as well. Like you're never going to probably get over 20 players a lot of the time with club teams, with county players being away and everything. So I think you have to just adjust it to what you have, but you can still bring out the principle of what you want to achieve in the session.
Yeah, and that's actually another thing that I was going to ask is how much emphasis do you put upon the basic skills? Would you build the basic skills before you bring these in, or would that be an emphasis? Would you put an emphasis on the very, very basic skills such as hand passing, kick passing, and so on before you start bringing this into your training sessions?
Well, the way I think is the best way to achieve, like your player skill set is the key thing to all of this. So I think from the very day one when you get in with your team, even if you're doing running sessions, your skills is what you want to develop from day one, and you're constantly developing your skills. But you can obviously merge the games, but you're going to get the best. Your games are going to be the best. I suppose you're going to be best when the skills are higher. They're going to be played at a faster pace, and you're going to get more out of them. So there's no reason you can't play the games earlier on in the year, but I think the big emphasis earlier on is develop your skills and your 1v1s and all that sort of stuff that's going to aid playing them type of games at high intensity.
Yeah, brilliant. And just a final question here from Liam. I suppose Liam here in his question is looking at the defenders or defensive setup. So I suppose he's looking at do you ask lads to set up in general areas of the pitch? And what happens if they are pulled out to a particular area? And do you have anything set up in order to get that? I suppose he's looking at it from a defensive point of view. Do you have set positions that you want to get your players into? And what happens if they get pulled out of there?
Well, I suppose it depends. It's about every person has a different game plan. I suppose like an ideal way, I suppose a lot of teams, what I'd like to do in general would be to tackle my way back down the field. I suppose you can set up, you'd have your matchups at the back when you attack. You know what I mean? If a team leaves 3 forwards up, you'd have your matchups there, and you might decide to play with a +1 for a certain game if that's what you wanted, and the rest of the players might tackle their way back down the field. I suppose you're probably coming back in line with the ball. If that's the way you want to play, I know with Galway you can see in the clip to drop back, just drop off a team. So it all depends on what your specific game plan is. Obviously, if you look at the clips there with Dublin, you're going to have players moving through. You have to decide is the best thing to track their runs, and no matter where they go, you mark them individually, or do you pass players on? I suppose it's specific to the team you're playing. Sometimes every situation is different, so I suppose you have to play what's in front of you. But I suppose the key thing is that the key players are marked on the opposition team, the key danger men, and after that, I suppose it's a part of passing fellas on or fellas go outside. But I'd say everyone in front of your scoring zone, in front of the goals, needs to be tightly marked as a general rule. And after that, you can let players, if they're out hugging sidelines or whatever, you can half mark them or stuff like that. If that answers it, I suppose it's all dependent on each game. Do you know what I mean? Or,
yeah, no, brilliant. I hope that answers your question, Liam. So we're just going. Unfortunately, we have only 5 minutes for a question, and it's the way this works. So thanks a million for that, Kevin. Really, really appreciate it. And we're going to jump on to Stephen's presentation now.
Hi, I'm Stephen Lonergan, and I'm going to talk about halftime team talks today. So hopefully, at the end of this, you'll have maybe 1 or 2 little strategies that you can bring to your team and utilize the halftime better than maybe you have been. So in the past, we've all witnessed where you go into the dressing room and it's based around, motivation and probably that's the psychology more so than the technical or tactical. It's generally one way led, or sometimes it goes around the table and all the coaches have a say. So I'm just going to give you a look into maybe how some of the top managers in the game are now doing the team talks, or how halftime is structured. So even Davey, in the past, he would have been very high into motivation, and in the last couple of years he changed that strategy. Jim Gavin has been very innovative in what he's done at halftime, and we'll have a look at that. So the first thing you should do when halftime comes is set your watch. You have your 15 or your 10 minutes, and you try and have a very structured halftime, so that the players know and you know what's going to happen from 0 to 15 minutes. This is very important. So, how to structure your halftime. Within a halftime, it's very important that you deal with the 4 pillars of performance: the physical, the technical, the tactical, and the psychological. So, from the 0 to 15 minutes, you should know where these are going to be covered and how they're going to be covered. So, we're going to look at it, just how to structure that 0 to 15 minute time frame. So, here's halftime strategies to enhance second half performance in team sport players. This is from a research paper by Russell 2014. Some effective strategies here that you can use. You can water it down if you're with an underage team. You should take something from it. So working back, so we enter the dressing room here in minus 15 minutes. Players return to the pitch. Dealing with the physical then, if we just look at that in isolation, you have, say for instance, the caffeine chewing gum. You know, you're replenishing the energy stores and giving them a bit of boost going out in the second half. The carbohydrate mouth swilling, that's an effective strategy, just boost the energy levels. To re-warm up, sometimes that can be done pitch or just before the second half starts, or be done in the dressing room. Dealing with, say, the technical, generally have the coach, the team talk, technical, tactical, and maybe the psychologically in terms of a little bit of motivation thrown in there. The technical or tactical can have a bit of video footage or maybe stats from the analysis side of things. So from here we can see though that it's clearly structured of what's happening when. 15 minutes to come in, they have that small block of time there for their own time or doing heat retrieval, etc. Coach speaks at a certain time, you know, footage maybe that obviously happens maybe at the elite, not so much down at the grassroots side of things. They take the caffeine chewing gum, they re-warm up, and the carbohydrate before they go out. So it's a clear structure of what's happening when, and I think that's very important that you have that structure when you are with a team. So just another thing to consider. Coaches, unfortunately, can only take in a certain amount of information from, say, the first half. So this study has found that only about 40% of what coaches see they take in. So there's a huge amount of missing from that. So it's important that you utilize everybody within your coaching setup to make sure that you take in a lot more information. The players are at the center of this, and it's important that you utilize those. They're the ones who have to make the decisions. Some coaches are now utilizing the players a lot more. Some coaches can take 60%. It's shown that that much experience it's in 40%. So player involvement is the big thing I'm going to look at here. How to involve the players. So Jim Gavin has used this strategy, and Eddie Jones recently in a podcast talked about how he uses the players, quite similar to what Jim Gavin does with England rugby. So this little piece here is taken from a newspaper article with Lonergan, and he just thought that, you know, just read it here. In every match that I played for Dublin, the exact same thing happened at half-time, regardless how the first half played out. The backs have a chat about the first half, the forwards have a chat about the first half, the defensive coach Declan Darcy has a chat with the squad, and if there's any key members he feels they need. And then Jason Sherlock does the same from an attacking perspective, So, there's a lot more player involvement there than maybe some of us are used to in a dressing room. I know Eddie Jones here spoke about what happens in English dressing room is where just before after the whistle goes at half time, the players get together in a huddle, a couple of leaders within that player group, and they look for some feedback from the players. Simple questions are asked, maybe three, like what are we doing well, what are we not doing so well, and how can we improve this? And they're the same questions that when the Dublin forwards and the Dublin defenders sit down and they talk about. The leaders then report back to Eddie. In the meantime, the forwards come together and the backs come together, and they go through what's been discussed out on the pitch. Eddie comes from that talk with the leaders. Eddie decides then what he wants to go forward with. He'll have his performance analysis stuff there, he'll have his player input, and he'll decide then what way he wants to play in the second half, what needs to be changed, or what are doing well, etc. So that's kind of an innovative method that I think we can all use, even if it's under 12s. We get a bit of input from the players, we ask them what they're seeing, what they feel they're doing well, what they feel that we can change, and I think it's a very good strategy to use the thinking players. Players who think for themselves because they're the ones on the pitch who make decisions. Another aspect is to incorporate the performance analysis side of things, whether it's at grassroots or at a senior inter-county, it's probably a little more important. But if you have some analysis done on certain aspects, some concrete evidence to maybe support your thinking, and that you can dwell in on a little bit more if it does supplement what you're thinking, and you can use that to help get your point across to the players. So that's something that we could delve right into in a lot more detail, but just something as food for thought there for you. So what can you consider for your next halftime talk? First thing is set your watch, be in control of that time. If you're 10 minutes or 15 minutes, know that and control that time. 0 to 15 minutes, every minute you should know what's going to happen. Have a structure, as I say, make sure, as I said, have all of what's planned in that 15 minutes for you and your players. They should all know. 3 things. Both coaches or any coach who speaks at the top level, they talk about having just 3 concise and clear messages. Players can't take in any more than that. So 3 messages rather than 10, 15 messages. Top coaches will get their points across in maybe 2 minutes talking. Don't need to be talking 10, 15 minutes on that time. Player input is another thing that is a novel idea that you might consider. Asking players 3 simple questions. What are we doing well? What are we not doing so well? How can we improve? So just them basic 3 questions might be a game changer. And the final thing then is to incorporate performance analysis. Start small, build it up as you go along. That's it for me. Thanks very much.
Okay. I think we have Stephen coming on there now. So thanks a million for that, Stephen. So I suppose, again, that video will be available under the resources section on the Longford website, which Damien will show you at the end. Again, throw your questions into the question box down below if you have any questions about what Stephen's after presenting. I suppose the first question I'd have for you, Stephen, is there a process that you go through in order to create this system? To break that down a little further, would you tell the players that this is the way that you're going to do your half times? Do you prepare them for how the half time is going to be structured and so on?
Yeah, well, I think if you're an autocratic manager or something, you know, it's quite a hard system to get into play. But if you're kind of a democratic manager and you ask a lot of questions in training, etc., I think it's a kind of a natural progression. But obviously, your first match at the start of the year, you know, you'd bring this into play, and from there, then you develop it or make any tweaks or anything that you need as you go along. So you learn yourself as you go along, and it needs to be controlled. You know, you can't let the thing get totally out of hand or whatever. But you know, as you go along and you start working with it, you will see progress, and you learn as you go.
I suppose that leads on to the next question I had for you was when you're rolling this out with the Offaly minors, do you ever worry about what might be said when you give the team talk over to some of the players?
Well, you're looking for opinions, and yeah, you know, I mean, you have to embrace that culture if you're going to go with it. You know, there is sometimes people will say things that, you know, are off the wall or whatever, but you're the manager at the end of the day, and you have to let that environment flourish. But then you're ultimately it's you who makes the calls then, what way you want to proceed the second half with. If you want to take on them ideas, or you know, you might have to say no, you know, there's too much there, we'll have to work on that in training and come back to it, you know, to bring that into the second half or something. So you know, it does have to be controlled within what you do. And you see that with Jim Gavin there, you know, he had Declan Darcy facilitating, you know, the backs, and then Jason Sherlock facilitating the forwards. So you know, you do need kind of a facilitator within the players, within those forwards and backs groups, to just control the conversation or to lead it in the right direction. So that's important.
And I suppose that leads on to Paul's question here is, how do you prevent the process turning into a blame game? So defenders blaming the attackers and attackers blaming the defenders.
Yeah, well, that's something. Yeah, again, that by having the facilitator there, you know, if you have one of your selectors maybe facilitating the conversation, you look at what you're doing well, what's not going well, and how can you improve. So largely you'd be looking at, as a unit, a defensive group, what you're doing well, and you know, you leave the attackers talk about what they're doing well or what they're not doing so well. So it's not a case of attackers blaming forward or backs and vice versa. So kind of just concentrate on your unit group as such, and not the others.
Yeah, and then again, that this leads on to Emily's question. Is there a fear that the same lads are going to talk during the half time? Do you select the lads that are I suppose within your unit groups that are your leaders within that, and are they assigned to talk, or do you allow everybody to talk, or do you pick people to talk?
Yeah, naturally you're going to have, you know, the kind of more leaders talking, etc. And you know, it's a process, because at the start of the year, you know, lads are generally reluctant to talk, and as the process goes along, you know, you get more out of them, and they kind of see the benefits of it, etc. So it's a real process. But you know, I'd encourage everyone to talk. Everyone needs to be thinking on the pitch. So you know, generally you'll have maybe 6 backs and one of the midfielders going with the backs, and so it's only 7 players within that group. You can incorporate the subs or whatever if you want, you know, the back subs or whatever, and they can have a voice too. So it's not a huge amount of people. So I think the big thing is to have that coach just facilitating that conversation and making sure everyone has a voice. I think that's important.
Another question here just about the re-warm up. About, I suppose, first of all, do you think it's valuable? And then when you're performing it, do you perform it in the changing room? Do you do it out on the pitch, or what exactly do you do?
Yeah, well, the re-warm up, yeah, there is research behind re-warm up, and that paper actually have up there that has it in it. You follow just basically the ramp protocols again, you know, for warm up: raise, activate, mobilize, and potentiate. But instead of having maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes like you would before a match, you only need, you know, maybe 1, 2, 3 minutes. So yeah, I think it is important, particularly a cold air or something. You know, you go into the dressing room and you get your body temperature comes down. You need to get back out there and, you know, get the body temperature up again and just activate the muscles a little bit. You know, with studs, etc., I wouldn't be, you know, doing a huge pile of movement in the dressing room. So I think it's probably out onto the pitch and, you know, get them into a circle, or, you know, you can get a culture where players go to their positions and re-warm up themselves if they're waiting for the team or whatever. So, you know, it depends, but it's only, you know, a minute, 2 minutes, you know, kind of squats, maybe squat jumps and lunges, power lunges or whatever. So just get the body temperature up and a few activation exercises there just to fire back up the muscles. That's all.
And just finally, I suppose, just to Damien's comment on, do you use the stop, start, continue system? I suppose that's very similar to the what we're doing well, what we need to improve on, and so on, that you would use. And then just Liam's question on underage clubs obviously wouldn't have access to video analysis or analysis. Any suggestions on what you would have seen or you would have done maybe if you were working with a club team?
Yeah, I'd never actually used video analysis at half time in a dressing room anyway. I think just you'd want someone really good with you to get the clips down to, you know, you'd be only showing 1 or 2 clips. So no, I've never used that. But performance analysis in terms of stats, I think they're important, because and I'm talking 1 or 2 stats that might back up what you're thinking. And, you know, to give that concrete information over to the players, I think that's important. But as I say, yeah, you mightn't use stats at all. There might be nothing that you need to bring in from the stats, but that's the manager's, you know, option, whether he thinks he needs to use that information or it's irrelevant. And if you're good stats man, you know, they should only really be bringing you, you know, a key performance indicator or whatever. Not the last thing you need is 10 pieces of performance analysis, and you're trying to work out what's relevant, what's not relevant in that short period of time. So that's a process you and your performance analysis guy have got to go through over a period of time. You know, he'll know then, or she'll know what's relevant and what's not relevant for that period of time. So that's
so sometimes pen and paper is just as easy, just taking down, having somebody on the sideline, if it's a parent, if you're an underage team or your club team, somebody just marking down scores, turnovers and so on, something as simple as that.
Yeah, with performance analysis, very basic stats can be, you know, vital, and just a couple of simple things can be key. And I'd start at the very basics level and work from there. Pen and paper is perfect. Yeah.
Lovely, Stephen, thanks a million for that. And we're just going to move on to John now on his creative approaches to games-based session planning.
Right, thanks, Michael. So I don't generally use fancy titles like this quite as much. It's just to give this a name. Main reason I started putting sessions around this template together, you can move on to the next one, Damien, is when I started going from kind of your traditional, just when I started coaching first, was doing a lot of drills, then into your game at the end. I wanted to move to something a bit more game based, but to make sure I was still getting the most out of the training session in terms of just valuable use of time, but still have an overall focus to it. I started doing sessions similar to this, maybe once a week or once a fortnight, that are predominantly game based, but in theory look the same backwards as forwards. So go on, Damien. An example of a palindrome just back there is NAVIN. So it's spelled the same backwards as forwards. So if you write down your session in terms of activity 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it should be 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. So mainly based around 5 to 7 activities, and to write it down, it looks the same backwards as forwards. Some of the main benefits around this then are that you have much less explaining of the games or activities themselves. So you can focus on the main thing you want to get from the session. And we'll look at a few examples as we go on. Hopefully, as the session goes on, you as the coach or the players or selectors you have with you will notice an improvement in what the players are doing, whether it be a skill or a system of play as the training session develops. So that can build a lot of confidence in players or in whoever else is just there watching the game, whether it be parents watching the training session. You also get to start and finish each session with a game, and generally have up to 4 games at least in the training session, which I think is key to keeping motivation high. And then just as a coach, it's up to you to adapt for age or the particular thing you want to focus on or the time of year they're ahead of you. So very basic layout. You just start straight off with your large-sided game, depending on numbers, whether it be 15v15 or 8v8. Then you go into something much smaller, 3v3, 5v5, 6v6. Then you have your development activity in the middle, whether that's a particular skill you want to focus on, an element of team play, some fitness, whatever it may be. Then you're back into the small-sided game, and you finish with your large-sided game. As you go up the ages, you would look then to include a warm-up and cool-down at the start and end, but with particularly young teams, they may not be as necessary. We're going to look now at 3 examples of that in action. So we look at an under-7 team or training. It can be hard to call it training under-7 sometimes. Just focus on fundamental movement skills and playing games. An under-15 team, this would be something like what a development squad session would look like, just to improve kicking length and kicking accuracy. And then an adult team, just your local club team, looking at some off-the-ball movement and trying to develop a little bit of fitness. So if we look at our under-7, we start off, and just being ambitious, we wouldn't have near numbers for this where I'm from, but we start off with an 8v8 game. Just have bibs lined up and 2 goals set out. As soon as they start coming, you pick up a yellow bib, you pick up a blue bib, blues play that way, yellows play that way, and straight into their game. And this is a great way, as they're coming up, they just know, grab their bib, straight into the game. Once then you have a much better idea of how much numbers you have, how many assistant coaches you might have there with you, you move on into some smaller sided games, just because for younger players, they start getting more touches of the ball. You can adjust the size of the pitch depending on what you're developing there with them as well. And just 4, so 2 little games, so they get an opportunity to play against different teams as well. So about 4 minutes a game, but just that. Then you go into a little skill circuit. So we start off with some kicking and catching at one station. Then on some hurdles and ladders for some jumping and running. Then some hand passing, focused on a football skill again. And then into a little game of tail tag. And small groups of 4, they can stay in the teams they were in for the games, just in the small sided game before this, as they move around. And about 6 minutes in each of those, back into your small sided game. They should still know their teams that they were on. They should still have the same bibs. The pitches are still set out. So there's very, very little explanation. Just straight back into a game. Then at the end, they're still hopefully in their blue and yellow bibs. Just remind them, remember the game we played at the start, back into that, and they're finishing with a full-sided game. Some of the benefits of that then, so as they start arriving late, it's much, much easier to just put them into a game than if you've explained a little drill and they're trying to figure out, oh, what do I do here? How do I go? They always know straight away, okay, game, playing that way, I'll keep going. There's much less explanation for you as a coach or as a group of coaches, depending on numbers there, because they're repeating the same activity towards the end of the training session again. You can try and encourage some parents to help out at some of the skill stations if you've broken up to 4. They may not need to be particularly competent coaches if they're just leaving out some hurdles or leaving out some ladders. So it's a way of integrating or helping in some new volunteer coaches. And then your kind of skill learning or development, which some of them may see as a bit boring, even if it is done through games, it's kind of hidden in the middle with games at the start and end. If you think it from a child's point of view, they go straight up and they play a match and they finish with a match. And if that's all they're telling their parents, and it's what the parents see as they come up to collect them, and drop them up, then they're obviously going to be delighted with just seeing games going on. If we move on then to an under 15 session, so like I said, around the development squad, we're looking to develop some kicking. So we start off standard warm-up. We're not going to go into detail on that, 8 to 10 minutes. Then into our full game. So this might be where you put your team out. They might have played, this is your local Longford development squad. They played Stevens Offaly a week ago. You put them out in the same lineup. You might have hopefully enough for 2 teams, 14v14. They just play each other for 6 to 8 minutes and replicate some bits from last week. Then you split into smaller games. You'll notice here, these are quite long, narrow pitches because the focus is on kicking length. Obviously, depending on what you want to develop, you'll change the size of what's there in front of you, because if they just try to run this up and down too often, they get too tired. To try and really develop kicking then, you set it up into, these can be game-based or drill-based. So they're just looking to land the ball in the square opposite them with 3 teams from the other team. And the squares that have set up there, you'd have more of those down along the pitch. And that's just, little games, 3 minutes long, to try and develop the kicking length and kicker accuracy. Staying with the same teams, they still have the same bibs on. They're back into their 7v7 games, but introduce some no carry lines. So they're not allowed to carry the balls across these lines. You can just dot them out with cones to really encourage players to kick across those. So your defenders to your midfielders and your midfielders into your forwards. Players can run across them as they wish, they just can't carry a ball across. And that's trying to encourage some longer kicking in your team. And then into your larger sided game to, again, see it as the longer kicking transition into where you want to see it in an actual game. You line them out more or less same positions at the start. You leave your no carry lines there. And you play a 10-minute game. And then at the end, as part of your cool down, you'll include a debrief here. This is where you start doing your questioning. This is often the real key to seeing have players learned or develop throughout the sessions. Just simple questions. Did the first game look different to the final one? Why not? And then how can you use that in future games? And just to look at an example then in an adult training session. Benefits. So again, you're still starting and finishing with a game. You've less explanation because the explanation, instead of being on the activity you're doing, gets to be on the thing you want to focus on. You don't have to explain the rules of your game. You get to spend more time focusing on, we really want to concentrate on kicking the ball long and where the movement should be to support long kicking. And again, then it's team play developed through some games. And last adult version then. Yeah, so looking at some off the ball runs. So again, our 15v15 game, we'll do a warm up then straight into that. Then our small sided games. So again, we just split the pitch down the middle and we have a little end zone game here. Just catch the ball over the dotted line. And as soon as you catch the ball, it's a score, turn around and run back up again. You can limit this over hand pass only or the length you want to kick to encourage some off the ball running. Into drill then, that's a combination of off the ball running and just straight up running to try and develop the both at once, really. So you do this for maybe 3 lots of 3 minutes. There's a nice physical hit in this as well from doing it. So just the first player has the ball, plays the man in the middle, continues his run, takes the pass and continues to run right onto the end, and same thing back up. Then we're back into our small sided game again. So you can adjust this to captain ball, which I'm not going to explain captain ball now, it's easy enough to look up, but this has a certain element of support play in it, or you can stick with your end zone. It's still a small sided game with the same number of teams, and then finish off with your large sided game again. And again, you would hope to see more of your off the ball runs in the game as you transition through the training session. So again, your recap is just asking the players questions, seeing what did you notice a difference? What was the difference? And recap then is just a large game into a small game, into whatever your focus is on that you're trying to develop, back into your small game, back into your large game.
Lovely, John. Thanks a million for that. That was absolutely brilliant. I suppose just with all of the games within that session, do you, I suppose, plan for the questions that you're going to ask at the end of them, based within your session planning?
Yeah, definitely. That's and it's one of the harder things I've found to develop. I suppose I'll give the analogy. Before I was a teacher, I served as a carpenter, and me and my boss had the exact same access to all the exact same tools. But what he made and what I made, his was 100 times better than what I did. And it's how you use the tools. It's the same with the games and activities you have here. It's the direction you give, but most importantly, the questions you ask to your players that develops their understanding of what you're trying to do, and hopefully lead to a stage where instead of you giving them direction, your questions lead to them giving themselves and each other in the team direction. To start off with your questions, because it can be hard to develop them correctly. I heard Billy Walsh, the boxing coach, once say that when it comes to a fight and the fighter comes into him, when the bell goes, he just asks him, what's happening? Waits for the answer. What are you going to do about it? And at a very basic level, if you're not, I suppose, experienced with asking questions, that's a really, really simple way to start. And then you can start developing from there.
Yeah, brilliant. I suppose in terms of the logistics of your session, and you talked about that it's easy to set up. What way do you go about setting it up? Obviously, with the under 7 session, you would have had a lot of moving parts within it in terms of splitting it up into sections. Do you just set up your large game first and then set out your cones during the session, or would you do it set out all your cones at the very, very start?
So usually you set up a kind of a grid, like a larger grid that everything is going to happen in, and you might leave, say, instead of splitting the pitch in half straight away, you'd have the lot of cones that you're going to use to split it in half just left to where that line, say, will start. So with maybe 30 seconds to go, I'll just run over, or I'll get a parent or whoever to run over. They'll drop the cones as I'm pulling the players in, say, right, we're going to split into 4 teams now instead of 2. When you split into your 4 stations after that, you might have the hurdles left down just off the pitch so they're ready to come in. You might have another few footballs or a few extra cones left just off the pitch in a corner there, so it's easy. But communicating that to your helpers or other coaches beforehand is a massive help in transitioning there. And as players actually get older, and if you can give names to the games or drills you play and players get to know them, that's a massive help in setup. So say I had one there called Cross Midland. If I ever said to players we're doing Cross Midland, they know exactly what it is, and they just know to pick up the cone, run 35 yards and drop the cone down, and they know to go from there.
I know you presented about something like this, or about the athletic development that you were doing at the Games Development Conference, and Emily has actually a good question about, I suppose, the younger age groups. Could you give us an example of a question that you might ask to a 7-year-old that would come in after a game that would, I suppose, elicit a good bit of learning for them?
Oh, that's a hard question. A 7-year-old, to be honest, anything I'm going to ask is, did you enjoy it? What did you enjoy the most? Why did you enjoy it? And once you start teasing out a little bit from there, and generally say, I enjoyed it because I did it in training and I got to use it in a match, and you just kind of steer them towards, well, to be better at using that in a match the next day, what do you think you need to do? And hopefully they'll come up with like practice at home, or try it with my friends or with my brother or something like that.
Yeah, and Damien is actually, after giving a couple of good ones in the chat box there, what makes the game fun, what's hard about the game, very, very simple, as you said yourself. And I suppose the last question is in terms of the intentions for the different games. So when you're setting up or planning your training session at the start, and you're going to say kicking, as you're going through the session, and if you're seeing something within your full-sided game, would you change the intention of the small-sided game based upon what you're seeing, or do you try and keep going through with the planning that you have?
To a point. So say generally, I spoke there about one focus. Generally, you'll have kind of one main focus and 2 secondary focuses. If you're working with a team over a prolonged period, a lot of your primary focuses are going to be set out much earlier in the season. You're going to try not to be too reactive based on played the league match Sunday night. Really want to work on that now Tuesday, because you would hope there is a longer term plan. Now, one of your secondary focuses, you might adapt one of those based on something you see, like with the adult team. If I notice they were a bit dead or a bit flat and I'd planned for a lot of running, I might adjust that by changing the distances between cones or by the amount of time we spend in the drill. But if my overall focus was to focus on running off the ball, I'm still going to include the majority of stuff around that, but maybe change little bits, say, like I said, secondary focuses.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thanks a million, John. So I suppose that's the end of our presentation. We're going to go into a very, very quick roundtable discussion. So these are just questions that people have submitted before the webinar. And I'm going to call Kevin. The first question is going to be to Kevin. So Kevin can just throw back on his video and his microphone there. First of all, I suppose, Kevin, the question is about, do you try to develop the broad principles of play where players have freedom to play the game as they see it, or do you want players in specific roles?
I suppose it'll be a mix of both, really. You would have certain players might have specific roles, but players would have the freedom to play within the system, within a specific set of guidelines. So, for example, like when you attack, the opposition might have 3 forwards left up, so you would have matchups at the back. So say you want 3 fellas specifically marking them men, and you might decide you wanted to play a +1 at the back. You might have a specific or rotating person to do that role either. And the same, I suppose, when you're defending, you might have picked 3 or 4 forwards you want to leave ahead of the ball for when you turn it over and move the ball up the field. But overall, lads within the system would have a lot of freedom to do whatever they wanted within the guidelines, I suppose. But if, for example, like if you meet a pack defence or whatever, you, as opposed to specific roles, you might have specific positions that you wanted filled. Like you wanted width, you wanted shape outside, you want a man high. Like you might want, like Shane, for example, with Tyrone, you might want him to stay high as much as possible. So he's always your target man. But overall, players can rotate as freely as they want, as long as the guidelines that are measurable within the game plan are adhered to.
Yeah, brilliant. And just one more was, I suppose, the best way to introduce a new attacking piece of play. Do you start from the inside first and then move out the pitch, or do you move from the middle of the pitch and then move in towards the inside forward line?
Yeah, well, yeah, I suppose what you mean, like if you're working on your inside forwards and their movement, I suppose what the best thing to do is the clips I showed earlier on, like where Mannion received the ball and you're just you'd start inside in the dressing room, show them the clips, show them tactics board, and then set up a few scenarios like with your skill drills, you're kicking and receiving the ball, a runner coming off and stuff like that. Like to get the thing going, you'd have your kicking drills at the start, you'd develop into your small sided game, like say the target man game, which you'd pick one of your inside forwards, just one of them. I think there was a question there actually, would you develop the game for two inside forwards? Not specifically. Within that game, like it's a high intensity game where you're moving the ball up the field and you're trying to get the right man on the ball and you're getting your forwards to move laterally inside and pointing where they want the ball. So you're bringing out all the principles of what you want with your inside forwards by getting your outfield players to get good balls with a bounce in the pass into space and runners coming off them. You can develop in, then you could have a 4v3 outside into it, or just develop into a full game where, say, inside the 45 you'd have a 2v2 or a 3v3 and you're coming up the field, and across you would have to kick the ball across the 55-meter line, where you always have 2v2 ahead of the ball at all times. So whatever you want within your attacking system, you can develop it up through small-sided games up into the full-sided game. And in the full-sided game, you just change the rules of the game so that it's very much an attacking-based game where they're moving the ball quick and there's a focus on getting the ball into your inside line as quick as possible.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks a million for that, Kevin. Stephen, one of the questions that came in for your presentation was, I suppose it's a scenario-based question. Your tactics have gone out the window in the first half. Is it stick to the game plan, or do you go totally new for the second half? That's a nice easy figure there.
Yeah, I think you. Well, I'd be of the kind of stick to the game plan. If in the first half, if lads have kind of gone off on their own accord and had started playing their own kind of game plan, or you kind of need to question that at half time, you know, what has gone wrong, or why have we gone away from the game plan to a large degree or whatever. So we need to get back to the game plan, or, you know, see why they've diverted from that game plan. But I wouldn't be rewriting the game plan totally at half time and changing everything you've kind of done in your training sessions and going with something totally new off the plate in the second half. I'd be kind of stick to the game plan and make a tweak here and there if needs be, but that would be my philosophy.
Perfect. And then John, I suppose the final question goes to you, and I'm going to get the two lads to jump in after you've answered this one. Obviously, there's a lot of resources out there at the minute in terms of webinars and podcasts and books. So if I could ask the three of you if you could recommend one resource that you've read, listened to, or watched over the past few weeks for the people that are on the webinar, what would it be? So John, you can jump in first.
I'll actually answer with two. So if I was to go webinars, sorry now to be going to a foreign sport, but Arsenal are running a series of webinars. They've cut it down from 5 a week to 3 a week, and they post them all on YouTube afterwards, covering a range of topics. I find as webinars that they're actually really good, and you can draw them back into GAA then. In terms of a book, read it a while ago, and I certainly would not be a fan of Matthew Syed, but Black Box Thinking, in that the general message it's trying to get across around learning next step, I've just found really good to apply back to coaching.
Brilliant. And Stephen?
Webinar or anything online there, I like all kind of Fergus Connolly's stuff. He's someone I follow, and I like his stuff. So he has stuff on his website there. So he has his Gaelic football specific stuff there. So I recommend that stuff. And a book, I just read a book there, Paddy Upton, The Barefoot Coach. He's actually a cricket coach. I have no interest in cricket, but he's just his philosophies, etc., and his psychology and how he coaches. Really enjoyed it.
And Kevin?
Yeah, there was a webinar there a few weeks ago by Stuart Lancaster, the Leinster rugby coach, which I thought was very good. I know it's a professional sport, obviously, but it's still, he brought out, like, it still went back to all the basics, and that's one of the big things that stood out. No matter what level you're at, I think what people can lose sight of with strength and conditioning and GPSs and everything, it still goes back to the basic skills of the game, and I think that's what everyone needs to focus on. I thought it was a very good listen about how he videos his sessions, even like what I was covering there, like with forward play, that he would video that and possibly show it back, and he recaps on a session. So there was some very good points in it that I think is well worth a listen.
Yeah, and I might just throw one in there as well. I suppose I'm just after finishing up the culture code by Daniel Coyle. It was excellent, just around building culture around teams and around clubs, and it's very, very good. It went really in depth, so I'd recommend that one. So I suppose that's it for tonight. I suppose first I'd like to thank the three lads for giving their time and presenting their ideas and hopefully helping people out. I really hope everybody that was attending really got something from it, and thanks a million.
Yeah, Michael, Kevin, Stephen and John, thanks so much from all in Longford GAA for your contributions tonight. I see Stephen has put in his recommendations there. If John and Kevin could just type in your recommendations into the text box. And Kevin, you might also type in your information from the huddle message and the record it, I think you were saying, if you just type in those as well. And I will show everybody where tonight's resource is going to be if you want to check it out tomorrow morning. We'll put the recording up. So under longfordgaa.ie, and up here at the top we have coaching and coaching webinars, and it takes you to this page here. So just week 3, we'll have the link to the resources is there already. I just haven't refreshed the page, and the recording will be there as well. So you'll get the videos from tonight will be under that, and then our interview with Brendan Maher on Wednesday night is the next thing we have coming up. And from tomorrow morning on, we will be telling you about our problems clinic, which is on next Monday night and the last webinar of this month. So Brendan Maher Wednesday night, and our coaching clinic on this night next week. So again, thanks very much everybody for joining us. Thanks to Michael and the lads for contributing, and we wish you all a nice safe evening. Thanks and slán.